The soft hum of machines and the quiet footsteps of nurses filled the halls of St. Mary's Children's Hospital. The walls were painted in soft pastel colors, designed to bring comfort to young patients who had spent far too much of their childhood in hospital rooms instead of playgrounds. The air carried a sterile but hopeful scent, disinfectant mixed with the faint aroma of flowers and the comforting presence of stuffed animals sitting beside the beds. In one of the rooms, a little girl named Emily, barely 7 years old, lay on a hospital bed. Her small frame was wrapped in a light pink blanket, her frail fingers clutching a well-loved teddy bear that had seen better days. Despite the four-drip attached to her arm and the beeping of machines monitoring her vitals, her bright blue eyes still held a spark of hope. Emily had been in the hospital for months, battling an illness that had taken away much of her strength but not her spirit. She was a fighter, but even the strongest warriors needed a little light in their lives. And today, she had no idea that something magical was about to happen. Across the city, Melania Trump sat in a sleek black SUV, looking out at the passing streets of New York. Dressed in an elegant yet understated beige coat with a matching scarf, she carried herself with the same grace she always had. But today was not about glamour. Today was about bringing hope where it was needed the most. She had heard about Emily through one of her initiatives and had been deeply moved by the little girl's story. A child who had spent more time in a hospital than in a playground, yet never lost her smile. Melania knew she had to meet her. As the car pulled up outside the hospital, reporters waiting by the entrance immediately perked up. They hadn't been expecting her today, and whispers of Melania Trump at St. Mary's began circulating. But Melania didn't stop for the cameras. This visit wasn't about publicity. It was about Emily. Inside, the hospital staff had been informed of her visit, but no one had told Emily. It was meant to be a complete surprise. As Melania stepped inside, the nurses and doctors greeted her with warm smiles. She shook hands with them, thanking them for their tireless work, before being led toward Emily's room. Outside the door, she paused. She wanted this moment to be just right. Taking a deep breath, she gently knocked and then stepped inside. Emily, who had been quietly coloring in a book, looked up. At first, her little brows furrowed in confusion, and then her eyes went wide with pure disbelief. Standing before her was Melania Trump, smiling softly, her presence filling the room with warmth. Emily gasped, her tiny hands flying to her mouth. Are you really here?" she whispered, barely believing what she was seeing. Melania walked forward and gently took a seat beside her bed. "Yes, sweetheart," she said kindly, "and I have been so excited to meet you." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes, but they weren't from sadness. They were from happiness so big that her little heart could barely hold it all. The nurse standing by the door quietly wiped her own eyes. She had seen Emily endure endless days of pain, but this was the happiest she had ever seen her. Melania noticed the teddy bear clutched in Emily's arms and smiled. "Who is this?" she asked gently. Emily sniffled and looked down at the bear. "This is Mr. Buttons," she said. "He's been with me since I was a baby." Melania nodded. "He must be very special." Emily nodded eagerly. "He's my best friend. But sometimes I wish I had someone else to talk to." Melania reached into the bag she had brought with her and pulled out a beautifully wrapped box. She handed it to Emily, whose eyes widened in excitement. "Would you like to open it?" Melania asked. With careful hands, Emily unwrapped the gift and gasped as she pulled out a brand-new plush bunny, soft and cuddly, with a tiny golden ribbon tied around its neck. "For you," Melania said, her voice full of warmth. "Now Mr. Buttons has a friend." Emily clutched the bunny close to her chest. "I love it," she whispered. "Thank you, Mrs. Trump." Melania smiled, brushing a stray lock of hair from Emily's forehead. "You are so very welcome, my dear." The two talked for a while, about Emily's favorite books, her dreams of one day having a tea party in the park, and how she loved painting even though her arms got tired sometimes. For the first time in a long time, Emily wasn't thinking about her illness. She was just a little girl, happy and full of life. Outside the room, nurses and hospital staff had gathered quietly, watching the moment unfold with hearts full of emotion. This wasn't just a visit. This was hope made real. As Melania finally stood to leave, she gently kissed Emily's forehead. "You are so strong," she whispered, "and I want you to promise me something." Emily looked up, her blue eyes shining. "What?" "Promise me that no matter what, you will never stop believing in magic." Emily smiled through her tears. "I promise." As Melania turned to leave, she felt a tiny tug on her sleeve. She looked down to see Emily holding out Mr. Buttons to her. "For you," Emily said. "So you always remember today." Melania's eyes softened. She knelt down, taking the bear gently. "I will treasure him forever," she promised. And with that, she walked out of the room, leaving behind a little girl who would never forget this day, a hospital filled with renewed hope, and a world that would soon hear about a small act of kindness that meant everything. As Melania Trump stepped out of Emily's hospital room, a hush fell over the gathered nurses and staff. Many of them had been working in the hospital for years, and they had seen numerous visits from celebrities, politicians, and public figures. But something about this moment felt different. Melania hadn't come with an entourage of cameras. She hadn't rushed to the visit, shaking hands and moving on. She had sat beside Emily, listened to her, made her feel special, and in those precious moments had given the little girl a memory that would last forever. Outside, Melania took a deep breath. The hospital had a certain air about it, hope mixed with sorrow, resilience mixed with struggle. She had seen the brightness in Emily's eyes, but she had also seen the exhaustion on the faces of the other children and their families. She turned to the hospital's chief administrator, a kind-looking woman in her late 50s, who had been observing from a distance. "How is she really?" Melania asked, her voice low but firm. The administrator sighed. "Emily is strong, but it's been a long road. She has shown remarkable resilience, but these treatments, they take a toll on her and on her family." Melania nodded, deep in thought. She had met countless children through her Be Best initiative, and every visit reminded her of the same truth. Sometimes, a little kindness makes the biggest difference. She looked down at the small teddy bear Emily had given her, Mr. Buttons. She ran her fingers over its soft fur, a bittersweet smile crossing her lips. After a moment, she turned back to the administrator. "Is there anything specific she needs? Any way I can help?" The administrator hesitated. "Well, her family has been struggling with the medical bills. Emily's mother had to leave her job to be with her full-time. It's been difficult." Melania's jaw tightened. No child should have to worry about bills while fighting for their life. She turned to her assistant, standing silently nearby. "I want to cover Emily's medical expenses. Make the arrangements quietly." Her assistant nodded, already pulling out her phone to make the necessary calls. The administrator's eyes widened. That's incredibly generous." Melania shook her head. "It's what's right." She turned to walk toward the next ward, but just as she did, a tiny voice called out from behind her. "Wait!" Melania turned to see Emily's mother hurrying toward her. She was a petite woman with tired eyes and a warm smile, the kind of mother who had spent too many sleepless nights by a hospital bed, praying for miracles. Tears shimmered in her eyes as she reached Melania. "Mrs. Trump, I don't even know what to say. Thank you doesn't feel like enough." Melania reached out and gently took the woman's hands. "Your daughter is an inspiration," she said simply. "She deserves the best chance at life." Emily's mother swallowed hard, trying to hold back her tears. "This means everything to us." Melania gave her hands a small squeeze before stepping back. "She's a fighter," she said with a small smile. "And fighters always win." The mother nodded, wiping at her eyes, watching as Melania walked away, surrounded by hospital staff who now looked at her with awe and admiration. The next morning, Emily woke up to find her hospital room decorated with balloons and flowers. Nurses smiled as they walked in, telling her that she had received a very special surprise. On the table beside her bed was a small gold envelope. Confused, she picked it up and carefully opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. "Dear Emily, never stop believing in magic. Wishing you health, happiness, and a lifetime of dreams coming true. With love, Melania Trump." Beside the note was a scholarship certificate stating that a fund had been set up in Emily's name to support her future education, a future that now looked brighter than ever. Emily gasped. "Mama," she called, her small voice filled with excitement. Her mother, who had just walked in, rushed to her side. As soon as she saw the note and the certificate, she covered her mouth with her hands, overwhelmed with emotion. The nurses in the room clapped softly, their eyes teary but filled with joy. One of the nurses knelt beside Emily's bed. "Do you know what this means, sweetheart?" she asked. Emily looked up, her eyes shining. "It means I get to go to school one day. I get to be something." Her mother kissed the top of her head. "You've always been something, my love. And now, the whole world will see it too." News of Melania Trump's act of kindness quickly spread. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about the way she had made Emily feel. Videos from the hospital staff, showing the genuine happiness in Emily's eyes, began circulating online. People from around the world commented on the story, sharing their own experiences of how a simple act of kindness had changed their lives. One tweet stood out. "Kindness doesn't need cameras. It doesn't need an audience. It only needs a heart." Today, Melania Trump reminded us what true compassion looks like. But for Melania, it wasn't about headlines or social media trends. That evening, as she sat in her home, sipping tea by the window, she picked up Mr. Buttons, the teddy bear Emily had given her. Holding it close, she whispered softly, "Thank you, Emily," because in the end, kindness works both ways. Emily had given her something too, a reminder that even the smallest moments of love can change the world. And that was a lesson she would carry forever. Melania Trump sat quietly in her study, the soft glow of a nearby lamp casting warm light on the room. She held Mr. Buttons in her hands, running her fingers over the worn fabric, thinking about the little girl who had given it to her. Emily's bright eyes and unwavering spirit had left a lasting impression, and Melania couldn't help but feel that their meeting was meant to be. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Emily clutched the letter Melania had written her, holding it close to her heart. Her mother sat beside her, unable to stop the tears that welled up in her eyes. For the first time in months, hope felt real, tangible, like something she could hold on to. Nurses and doctors continued to stop by, offering smiles and congratulations, telling Emily how special she was. She had always known she was strong, but now she felt seen in a way she never had before. The impact of Melania's visit continued to spread beyond the hospital walls. The scholarship fund set up in Emily's name inspired donors from across the country to contribute, ensuring that not only Emily but other children facing similar struggles would have opportunities for a better future. News outlets covered the story, but it wasn't the headlines that mattered. It was the way the world responded. Strangers sent letters of encouragement. Children in schools across the country made cards, and hospitals in other cities started seeing more visitors, bringing small acts of kindness to children who needed them most. As days passed, Emily's health slowly improved. She kept Mr. Buttons and the new plush bunny Melania had gifted her side by side on her bed, a reminder of the day she met someone who believed in her dreams. One afternoon, her doctor came in with a smile on his face, sharing the news that her condition was getting better. The treatments were working. There was still a long road ahead, but she had more strength than ever to fight it. Melania continued to check on her progress through the hospital staff, wanting to ensure that Emily's journey was one filled with hope and possibility. She never sought credit, never spoke publicly about what she had done. It wasn't about recognition. It was about knowing that somewhere in a hospital room, a little girl had been given a reason to smile, a reason to keep fighting. Months later, Emily finally left the hospital, stepping outside into the fresh air for the first time in what felt like forever. She held her mother's hand, looking up at the sky with wonder. "Mama," she said softly, "I think I want to help people when I grow up, just like she helped me." Her mother smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "And I have no doubt that you will, because sometimes the smallest act of kindness can inspire a lifetime of change."